Our guest, Dr. Patrick Muinde, is already seated and ready to hammer out these things blow by blow about how this affordable housing implementation hullabaloo talk will go. But before we welcome him, let's look at today's proverb from Djibouti.
Yes. Clouds do not always mean rain, but...
Is it, Dr. Muinde?
Yes. When we see clouds, it doesn't always mean that there will be rain. So to me, that I would interpret, sometimes it's not what we see. Probably there could be something under it. But when you see the smoke, it means that something must be burning. So smoke is triggered by fire. Cloud does not necessarily mean that it is rain. So sometimes we see symptoms which do not necessarily mean that it's what we are seeing.
Okay. So then I can jump right into this thing and ask you, with all of this affordable housing talk, as we're getting into the conversation, are we seeing clouds or are we seeing smoke? If clouds don't necessarily tell us that there will be rain, if smoke tells us that there will definitely be fire, in this case fire being that this thing is going to strike the match and it will go and Kenyans will be happy, or clouds being that we're seeing what could be an affordable housing plan but it is not going to rain.
It will depend where you are. If you are the citizen, the Kenyan, the hustler out there, you are just seeing clouds. There won't be rain. And I think I can put my bet on that. If you're on the side of the guys who are promising it, then there is surely something for them.
When we talk of this particular finance bill, this is a finance bill 2023, 2022. We forget that there was a finance bill 2018.
Yes.
Now, simple question. How different is that finance bill from this one? Because when you look at what some of the things that finance bill proposed, some of them seem like to be a carryover, things that we're grappling with now. But the similarity in the 2018 finance bill and this one, they both talked about increasing taxes. They both did. Yes. So
now, if we specifically narrow down to the levies that you're talking about and the affordable housing and what we are calling the public-private partnerships, for me, we are abusing a very innovative idea in finance. Because this PPPs is what we call financial engineering. It's part of what we call financial engineering. But this is a very innovative and noble idea in its technical definition and application. But when it comes to Kenya, and specifically, we can trail history, PPPs are not what we see. They are conduits to formally freeze the public. So that's technically what it is. And let me put it in context.
Put it in context. Freezing the public also means.
Now, what we call public-private partnership, there are three things that are very critical for you to do PPP, or they're very critical to PPP. Number one, public sector wants to attract capital from private sector. So government realizes that they do not have enough money to do development as fast as they need. But private sector has a lot of money that they can access. But there's a disparity in interest. Public institutions are not profit-making. Private institutions are profit-making. Okay? So government wants to bring capital to provide public goods and services that are not necessarily profit-oriented. Number two, you want to bring the private sector efficiency in provision of public goods and services. So the other key attribute of PPP. Private sector by design, because of market forces, they are forced to be efficient. So they are likely going to find the most suitable and most efficient approaches to deliver a project. So public sector wants to attract that. And then there's technology. Private sector, because of the market forces, they are forced to be to invest and innovate. So they spend a lot on research and finding the most cost-effective means because of market forces. Now, public sector is not like that because they do not have any profit motive. So those are three key things that take us to PPPs. But for you to identify a candidate of PPP is where the question is, and that's where the mystery of this discussion is. One, you can only go to PPP if there's a commercially viable idea. So underline commercially viable idea. Because you're bringing private actors, for them to give you their capital, they must see the profit in it.
Okay.
So there must be a return for them. Now, if you look at the housing that we are talking about, and I think you can recall when the PS was here, he said he offered so much land across the country that were not taken up. Okay? So if I want to make money and I'm a private investor and I'm being given a free land and I don't take it, why am I not taking it? It's because I can't see
the benefit,
the commercial viability of it. Then if the government comes in and gives me now sweeteners, because now if a project does not have that commercial viability, the government provides some sweeteners to make it attractive to a private investor. Now let's look at the sweeteners, because this is where nobody is talking about. What is the first sweetener that is being given in this affordable housing? You are given free public land, prime public land. Okay, free, and you're a private investor. Okay, now go back to the history of land grabbing in the country and see where the catch is. So just draw a quick connection with this. But then let's look at the second sweetener. Government waives all the permits and taxes. So all the materials that I'm getting and I'm bringing, and the permit that I need to get to build the houses and do commercial construction, they are waived out. So government gives me free land, which is a key driver of cost of housing. Then they remove all the taxes, which is also a key driver of cost of building. So if the government gives me those sweeteners as a private investor, the assumption is that now I can leverage and make money. Okay? So that means that then I can put up the houses. I don't have to meet all the cost. So it means that I pull down the cost of the houses. Then I can sell the houses in market. But then look at what has happened. The government goes on the other side and now picks you at 3% by 3%, and then guarantees an automatic buyout of those houses. Okay? So I have nothing to lose as the investor. Okay? So the government has guaranteed if I build 100 units, I'll buy them 100%. And they have guaranteed not to buy them at cost, but to buy them at cost plus profit margin. Now, you look at yesterday, the margin that was mentioned was 30%. Now, which industry in Kenya will give you a profit margin of 30%?
I don't know that one exists.
None. Look at the data of last quarter of 2022. The highest paying subsector in Kenya was the government, treasury bills and bonds. They are giving about 12-13%. So it was the highest, the most profitable subsector last year as we closed the year 2022. Now, what this means, the simple meaning of this is that if I have some 100 million somewhere, I just need to walk to the government. Tell them I have this money. The government is going to give me free land, waive all the taxes, I build the houses for them, and then I cash out that money. Now, go back to look at financial complications. If I have this money fraudulently acquired and it's somewhere in my house, I take the 100 million, clean it through this system, and I go home with millions Muinde. In profit.
Dr. Muinde, you're an economic and financial expert.
Yes.
You know these things, right?
Yes.
What you're essentially saying here, and stop me if I'm wrong, is that because PPPs, we're talking about public-private partnerships,
yes.
Private now being the private developers that you have then described, public being government.
Yes.
So what is happening here is that government is saying, look, we don't have the wherewithal. Our job is to provide a conducive environment within which these things can happen.
Yes.
Right? So public land, government is ours.
Yes.
Right? You may have the capital. So what we'll do is we'll create that environment within which you then can come and develop. We will go to Kenyans and say, give us 3% of your earnings.
Yes.
Your employers will back you, will match that 3%, we'll put it in a fund, and then we'll still tell Kenyans to come back and give us maximum 5,000 shillings every year for the next, however many years for them to buy these houses. And we will return all of your money back to you at the point at which you want it. Okay?
Yes.
What I hear you saying now is that the government essentially has opened up the possibility for this housing fund to be a laundromat.
Yes. Technically, you see, look at the discussion, the way the discussion is evolving. And that's what I'm saying. Every time the discussion is being brought out here, the more complicated it is appearing. Now, based on the discussion that was there yesterday, in the precedent that was done yesterday, all I need is to have some millions somewhere. That's it. Okay? That's it. If I have this 100 million or 200 million or 300 million, I just pose as an investor. Because you see, when you do a PPP, the partners need to share the benefits and the risks. So let me ask, what risk is the private investor taking here?
Okay, but I have to ask this question, Daktari. Are we saying that simply because it's a PPP and the government wants to achieve certain goals, that all other rules and regulations and laws that pertain to the management of money and the flow of money in this country will also be suspended?
Now, let's look at evidence.
Yes.
Let's look at all the PPPs we have done. Where are we having problems with the electricity bills?
Why are we having problems with the electricity bills?
Yes. How much does Kenya Power buy from Kenchen, the national producer? And how much?
You now want us to have this discussion about the
No.
the,
I'm just
the independent power producers, because that's
Yes.
where we're going with this discussion. isn't
yes.
it?
Because the independent power producers,
That's a PPP.
they're PPPs.
Yes, they are. Their job is to essentially produce. Whether or not you pick up all of it or not, you're still going to pay them. Whether you pick it up in its entirety
Yes.
or you pick up just what you need.
But at what price?
Actually,
At a pre-negotiated price that you cannot come out of.
Yeah, but before we even get there, is how did we agree to be paying for things which we may not even necessarily use?
Yes.
And at a fixed price that
It has been
guarantees.
pre-negotiated.
Yes, and from the discussions we've had, it appears we cannot renegotiate or negotiate ourselves out of it.
Out of it, yes.
How did we get there? So is this, you are saying that our lived experience tells us that the moment such a discussion is had and we go by the precedents, then it does not forebode well.
Yes, because that's the evidence we have. Because even right now, I think recently the media brought out some of the early PPP that was signed. So you realize we've been told it's investors out there, but it's just people inside. Now, just go to the second one. Let's go to the second PPP. Look at the Lift Valley Railways. That was second major PPP. What happened? That's a PPP that we signed. Then come to the third one, the road outside here. It's a PPP, we are told. But when you go to regulation on toll, regulation number 18, the government has underwritten 100% any fall in revenues for the investor. Now, basically, when you talk about PPP, there must be sharing of benefits and risks. And that I'm asking, if the government gives me free land, it waives all levies, taxes, and everything, then it guarantees to buy the house at profit. So what risk am I taking as a private investor?
So there's no risk to you as a private investor.
Zero risk.
No, a partnership means you should also share the risks.
Yes, but that's the thing that we're saying now with the PP. What Dr. Muinde is saying now is
Our examples of
the
PPPs.
examples of PPPs that are resident in this country today, that there is no risk to the private partner.
Yes, completely no risk.
Why?
Why?
That's where the catch is. And that's why I said we are using prime public land, giving it to who? Private investors. We remove all the cost of building that house, and then we guarantee to buy it at a profit. So what is the risk of the private investor? Nothing. So all he needs to have is to have the money.
Actually, there is a risk, Dr. Muinde.
Which risk?
Yes. It's an inadvertent risk in this sense. If I look at what has happened to Ghana, the issuance of these government bonds, because IMF have been brought in to help with their restructuring, investors in these bonds are taking a hit. If you have a PPP and you correctly put it, I have X million shillings and I give it to the government, in theory, undertakes to guarantee me a certain return, certain things remaining constant. Mm-hmm. If those things don't remain constant, then that guarantee goes out of the window, because the assumption is that that guarantee cannot be shaken.
Yes.
And Ghana is telling us it can be shaken.
Now, by the time you get to that level where the government is unable to pay its public debts, then the economy will be in deep problems.
And we are saying that we are not near that position yet.
Are we not there already?
Or we are very far away from it? Is that what we are saying?
We are still a few meters from that. And you see, this is what is happening. The reason why these levies are being put here as mandatory is to guarantee the government will buy out the houses. So I line the money for the private investor first, because I'm collecting this money. But then let's put into context, because this arrangement and this discussion is define the basic rules of economics. Now, this project has not started today.
What are these basic rules of economics?
The first big rule of economics is that there can never be an opportunity for arbitrage. And the market does not see it. What that means is that if there's a place you can benefit and make money and profit, many investors are going to see this opportunity and take advantage of it and remove any abnormal profit.
What should be the burden of risk on a private investor in a project such as this? What should it be? Because if we're saying that there is none and there ought to be, because it is a partnership we all share, right?
Yes.
We share in the benefit, we share in the risk. What should be the burden of risk upon a private investor in such a partnership as we see it today?
Yeah, you see, if the project is commercially viable, and that's why I said you cannot go PPP, it's not commercially viable. Mm-hmm. If the project has an opportunity to be commercially viable, the government has given you a sweetener. It has given you free land. Mm-hmm. It's just taken away all the permits and costs and taxes from you. So once you build the houses, the government cannot go on the other end and guarantee 100% buyout. So I'll give you the money, I'll give you the land and the taxes and all that, then I leave it to you to sell it on the market. So when the government goes on the other side to guarantee purchase, they have assumed 100% the risks. So what that means is, if that house, for example, and I think there's house that have been mentioned, had houses being mentioned in Maralal and other places, in Wote or whatever else, which are probably not attractive for these investors. So when the government buys out from them, who is going to buy out from the government?
Remember the discussion?
I told you that you who is giving your 3% on and if you're giving your 3% and you happen to be
and the employer is giving the employer is also giving 3%.
Yeah. If you then happen to be an indigene of Wote and then you realize that there is a house there that I can buy, after all, I've given 3% of my salary for the next 10 years, then I can go and purchase a house in Wote.
Now
guaranteed the government, and I pay not more than 5,000 shillings for 10 years. I've bought a house.
You see, those are the basic rules of economics that we are assuming. Number one, the government has not been building houses from 1960 when it got independence. Who has been building houses?
What about the National Housing Corporation, who under the government?
They are public, but they do it on commercial. Okay?
They sell for profit.
I understand. The point I'm making here is that they are government and they do build. Unless we're saying that if government builds, the element of profit shouldn't be there.
No, you see, the question is, from 1960, how has been the housing sector? Are we assuming there has been a complete vacuum?
No, there hasn't.
And that's why I'm saying the basic rules of economics is, if in the housing sector there has been opportunities for investments, private sectors have seen these opportunities and taken advantage of them.
But national housing is not private sector.
Yes, but you see, it's the government agency to regulate that market component.
Yes.
And that's what I'm saying. You see, the discussion right now is, it appears like Kenyans have not been living anywhere. It's just like we've been in the streets.
Been paying rent, but now the government is saying, live in your own house.
But there's another complication. Look at the economic structure. Okay, where are the majority of Kenyans? Urban or rural?
Rural.
Now, what is the land tenancy? There's private ownership of land in Kenya. And I've had these examples because these examples have been used to sell a narrative that is not necessarily correct. We've talked about the Asian tigers. We've talked about Singapore. We've talked about South Korea. We've talked about
I
China.
think we've hit a record, actually, because today is Thursday, and I don't think there's been a day this week that we've not talked about Singapore.
Singapore has been mentioned so much,
Yes.
you'd think it's a neighboring country.
Yes.
Yes.
So you see, how do they do housing? Because they are government-driven. Now, if you go to those countries, you do not have... The land tenancy is very different from ours. Government owns all the land.
Yes.
And there we have what we call a benevolent dictatorship. This is how these countries work. Ours is a market-based economy. So in benevolent dictatorship, if the government comes for your land, you don't ask anything. In any case, it is their land. And then they dictate what housing, sizes of houses and everything. But let's look at the Muinde of Singapore, because it's being sold as the Muinde we're using. In Singapore, you save about 40% of your income to the National Social Security Fund. And then they guarantee a return of 4% on your investment there. When you want a mortgage, you go to the SEM, and then they give you the mortgage at 6%. So it's been managed from a central agency. Now, what does NSSF give you back here? Other than your contribution. When you look at your statement, have they ever loaded return on your investment?
No. They don't.
Okay? They don't. So the only thing you see is what you have given them. And you've done that for the last 20, 30 years. And when you retire, you barely get what you gave out. Now, go to China. China right now, it's in a serious crisis because of over-investing in housing in areas that were not commercially viable. Right now, as we sit here, China is pulling down hundreds of thousands of houses as we sit here. But still, China is a benevolent dictatorship. So you cannot inbuild corruption in these countries when you're in those countries. But let's look at the reality here. Because when you look at these projects, we are assuming now angels have fallen from heaven to Kenya.
The things that you're saying is not the message that is being passed, Patrick. What is being passed is that it's the saving for you for tomorrow. So why wouldn't you be happy? And why would it be so difficult for you to grasp that you give 3%, your employer gives 3%. At the end of it, before you can say Bob's your uncle, you have a house. Why is it so difficult to get that? Or is that not what we're saying here?
Now, this project has been ongoing from 2017. Now, look at every budget that has been done from 2017. We have set not less than 6 billion to affordable housing.
We've put aside 6 billion.
Every budget here.
And
check all those budgets.
Yes, and where does this money go to? Where is it nestled? There's 6 billion. So where is it housed?
It has been going to the fund. That's the assumption. It has been going to the fund.
Which
that
fund?
Has been put in. The National Housing Fund. The one that, the mortgage, the component.
The one which initially had 1.5%.
Yes.
And now has 3%.
Yes. You see, when the 1.5% was removed, government continued to fund it.
Yes.
So they've been funding 6 billion.
Every year.
Every year that's been
from 2017.
Yes.
So if we do the maths, we're now in 2023. That's 5 years down the line.
That's 36 billion shillings.
Yes, every time that project has been funded under the big four
So
agenda.
in theory, there should be 36 billion shillings that is sitting somewhere that can actually be used for...
Or there should be houses scattered about the country worth 36 billion shillings.
Yes, and that's what I'm saying. We are talking about something that can defy the basic economic logic. Now, let me come to the exact question that you're asking. Why are we not seeing this? Now, we are assuming the market of Kenya, which is now the investor market, and the households are collectively not intelligent or not, if I can use this term, we are saying the market is foolish. It doesn't able to identify profitable and beneficial opportunities. Because if these houses and this project have been going on from 2017, there are houses that were being given as case studies, and some are in the urban areas. Now, you mean the people of Kenya are not intelligent enough to have seen these are good deals? And because and that's why I said economics and the concept of arbitrage means that if there's a good deal out here, enough people will be able to see that deal and grab it. So right now, if the deal is as good as it's been marketed as of yesterday, then Kenyans will be scrabbling for that, scrabbling for those houses. But they're not. Why are they not? Because now that's a market anomaly. Because I said, if, for example, I go to the stock market, and there's a share that can make profit, then the assumption is that many investors are going to see it and bid for that price and pull it down.
Let me pull you out and hopefully hear if it is not being scrambled after. I mean, I think of the many things that were introduced into the market and people ran after them because they could immediately see the commercial viability of this thing and they went for it. Whether it doesn't matter what you want to talk about, whether people were selling, whether it was quail eggs, whether it was whatever it was, but that it was quick, that people could see, here we can make something, and it was clear.
Yes.
So in this case, people are not scrambling for it. Many people say one of the reasons is that you want to insist that you take the money from me and then I come for it later. Why would it be then that people don't want to go after something for which we know Kenyans have an appetite for anyway, in the name of real estate?
Now, what the market is telling us is there's no deal. There's no deal there. If the deal is as good as it looks like or it's been said to be, we'll all be there. All of us want to own homes. All of us want. So, and that's why I said, when we see people are not going for the deal, we are saying collectively, the Kenyan market is abnormal. And in any opportunity of benefits and money making, people cannot be abnormal. You see, I'm a rational consumer. I need to get the best house I can get at the most affordable price. Now, the other thing is, you see, when you talk about housing, there must be ability to pay. Okay? There must be ability to pay. And that's why I said, we cannot discuss this thing and we are taking it out of the socio-economic context of the country. Many people in Nairobi, they have rural homes because they plan to retire in their rural areas. Now, I will scratch something else somewhere else. Now, most of us who are in our 30s, late 30s, 40s, and 50s, we are taking care of our parents back home. So we are carrying that burden. So now I'm told, if I'm 50 years, let me contribute. And if I don't want the house, my children will pick up. So again, you're bringing another problem. I'm having my parents who are depending on me. So I'm carrying a previous generation on my back. You are now taking me to carry the burden of the generation of my children. So that's why what thing we are doing. The government is formally,
but with a benefit. There is a yes, there is a promised benefit. It's called a house. You see, now it becomes a futile gesture and a futile pursuit if there are no houses, and yet I am contributing, or if the possibility of there being a house does not exist or it evaporates into smoke. Then I have to ask this question. We were introduced to the Kenya Mortgage Refinance Company in the previous government, all right? And we were told their job was to help make these things possible. We're talking affordable housing, but a new concept came into being with this government: social housing. Now, what's the difference between an affordable house? Because the story of affordable housing has been with us for a very long time. Long before Kenya Mortgage Refinance came into being and all these things. That term has been there. Social housing is new. So the social component of housing, what is it and how different is it from affordable housing?
You see, at policy level, we are simply using semantics to confuse the publics. If you are building social housing, fund it from taxpayers. Fund it direct from taxpayers. Why are you taking it from me? Why are you taking money from me to fund a social housing? And collect the taxes the normal way you
do. I hear you
and that's what I'm saying,
that you've already contributed to the social housing anyway because you pay taxes. So if the money is being used to build it, it's part of your money which you've paid in taxes that is being apportioned to the building of houses. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, but you see, the point I'm saying is we are mixing very innovative ideas in finance to confuse the public. Now, here you are told it's a PPP. Okay? Here I'm told I must contribute whether I like it or not. Then on the other side, I'm told it is the poor guy who is going to get the house. Because social housing is for the bottom in the pyramid. The bottom in the pyramid. Now, let's look at the houses that have been finished. Have they gone to the bottom in the pyramid?
Which houses in particular?
Like the ones that we're told about, the ones in Gara. We've been told about some
in
others.
Park Road and so forth.
Yes,
They actually exist, by the way.
Yes.
And
So who owns those houses?
No, but we were told. Were we not told that there's somebody who the PS sat here and told us that there are people, border owners. He was very proud to see that there was somebody who owned one of those homes.
There are groupings of people whom we refer to with this current dispensation as hustler, who actually
own these houses.
The numbers specifically were even mentioned, but there's somewhere I'm going with this. Voluntary contribution, mandatory contribution. Okay. If we take the argument that our taxes already cater for these things, then I would argue that we should not also pay for NHIF because I'm already taxed. Okay, and then I would also argue that you cannot take from my money to pay for NSSF because I'm taxed in other ways. What am I saying? That we sometimes need to segregate and to put money aside for specific things. If we can have it for NHIF and NSSF, why can we not have it for a housing levy or for a housing fund? Why not?
Now, let's look at the history of funds. And that's why I said let's go by evidence. What do we know about NSSF?
National Social Security Fund.
Yes.
What do we
have about it?
There's some money every month. So when you retire, that you'll be given, money after retirement that you can survive on.
How then do pension funds work?
More or less the same.
I contribute, they invest the money, and every year they load my returns.
Yes.
Is that what NSSF is doing?
No.
Now, look at the public projects and land projects where NSSF have been used to plunder. How much land do they own that is useless?
Daktari.
You see,
I'm in agreement with you. I'm in agreement with you, but the fact that a good initiative has been bastardized doesn't negate the fact that the thinking behind it was sound. We are looking at how it has been misused. We are looking at how everything that was intended for is what we keep talking about and witnessing. But it doesn't mean that the idea of NSSF was necessarily a bad idea.
Yes, and that's why I said we cannot talk about these discussions outside the socioeconomic context. And that's why I said the last statement before we went for the break, I said we are assuming and we are selling this project as if angels have fallen from heaven to come and manage the specific component of housing fund. Now, how many funds do we have in this country?
Well, there are many.
And what do we know about them?
Well, if they are public...
And what is and because the question yesterday, one of the things that was mentioned was the question of trust issue. Why will you trust a fund when so many funds we know about them?
Doctor, let me ask you this question. If it is a fund that has been set up by the government, a public fund, what should we expect in terms of the accountability factor, and how should we expect to be informed about it? What are the things that are our right by virtue of citizens that we should know?
Now, one thing, if we are going that route, and we must go that route, one, let this contract be made public. Let's know what are the private sector being offered. Okay? Let's know the terms of their contracts. Let's know why the government is guaranteeing 100% buyout, and what is the risk, or what is the contribution of the private investor other than the money. But also, very important, because you're using public money and you're getting from me by force, then make those company and their beneficial owners public.
Okay. Looking at how, I can understand, and I think those desires are aspirational. If we want to be very serious about, contracts that have been or not been made public in the past, the one that has been clamored here about what happens or what happened with the expressway here, make it public. What happens with independent power producers that you've talked about here, make it public. Let's see what actually you committed Kenyans to for a very long period of time.
Yes.
I can hear you on that, and that needs to happen, especially when you're dealing with the public.
Yes.
It needs to happen. The guarantee that it will happen. I would say that we would have to wish a little bit stronger and maybe sweat a little bit more to see if somebody would listen to that desire.
Yes.
But in all of this, at the end of the day, what we're asking about this fund is all of these practices, will they end up in houses being built? If they end up in houses being built, does it negate the fears that you have now about this whole thing being a scam?
I've said we have been doing this project for the last 5 years. Where is the houses that are being built? Who are the owners?
Park Road.
Because if we are really talking about hustlers, and that's why you're talking about mixing, welfare houses and affordable housing and all that.
Welfare.
Because if you're trying to solve a housing problem, the problem really must exist. The problem really must exist.
But the housing problem doesn't exist.
You see, we are assuming if I'm renting a house, I need to own a house.
You're assuming that Kenyans want to own houses?
Yes, that's what we're assuming. And you're assuming I want one house in Nairobi.
Is it a wrong assumption?
It is based on what? And you see, the same case I'm saying, if you're telling me, if I can't own the house, I'll pass it to my children. Right. You're also assuming my children want to live where that house is.
All right.
So I'm denying my children and the generation of my children the right to choose where to live.
All right.
Okay.
The fact that I live in this town and I work here, and if I look at Kenyans, this is now not my assumption, but what I observe and I see, meaning my lived experience.
Yes.
The enterprising nature of Kenyans that is often talked about is because Kenyans go into business.
Yes.
Now, owning a home, if you look at how we attach, for instance, the ownership of something like a vehicle, it is assumed one has acquired wealth just by owning a vehicle. Why is it that Kenyans buy plots? Again, for the sake of buying plots, but hopefully to put up a structure.
Yes.
The reference here is investment.
Yes.
Okay? So if I look at the idea of a house as an investment and not just a house, then I would argue that assumption is not wrong.
Yes.
Many Kenyans would like to own a house because they see it as a good investment.
Yes.
Okay? From that perspective.
Yes.
Now, if I take that view, and then I take the view that they are limited by the fact that they can't afford it, and that's why they live where they live, and that's why they pay the rents they pay. Now, if someone comes up with an idea and says, I can actually get you to own this house by you paying the rent that you pay, it will be an attractive proposition.
Yes.
Now, that's one discussion.
Yes.
Now, by discussion, again, now by lived experience, as to whether this will be a reality, that's a completely different discussion. And I believe that's what we are discussing here.
Yes.
Whether this is actually a realistic possibility, given our lived experience with funds, with projects, and with housing projects that are government related, whether the people for whom we are told it is intended for eventually end up getting what was in theory and spoken of intended for them.
Yes. You see, every economic I said cannot have a vacuum. Okay? The reason why Kenyans are not excited is because, you see, we are selling this project as if there has been a vacuum.
But
in the last 50 years,
there is a vacuum.
In the last 50 years, Kenyans, you see, the desire of human beings is to get the best out of them.
Is to better their lives.
To better their lives.
Yes.
So in the last 50 years, the government has not been building houses. What Kenyans have been doing?
How have they been
chamas. We have been in circles. We have struggled. We have bought plots all over, put houses. We have put up houses. There have not been a vacuum. Now, and that's what I'm saying. It's a very wrong assumption to assume that all of us want to own a house probably in Nairobi or wherever it is. Because the people who have ability in Nairobi to put up a home and own a home are already either having a plot, the one that you're talking about, or they already have a house, or they already put in stones and cement in their construction site. Okay, so that is there, and that's what has been happening. And you see the government coming in also, it's bringing a distortion. Because when government tries to interfere in market, a sector that has been market dominated, it becomes a distortion. Because one, people have already put millions in investments in rental houses. So are you trying to kill that enterprise?
What if people don't take up the houses?
And that's what I asked. You see, the private investor puts your money, the government buys out from you. You hand over and you get out. Okay? We don't take the house. Because one, if the private sector saw these houses, if the houses were really commercially viable, the private investors would have seen the houses in Maralal. If there was a demand for those houses in Maralal, private sector would have seen it. Okay? So you go and build the houses there. The private sector didn't see it.
Maybe because it doesn't.
And the government buys out from them. The government buys out from them. And if the demand does not exist, so the government wants the house to take it where?
Yes, but Daktari, what Maralal and Nairobi are completely different.
Yeah, and that's what we're saying.
And if you're talking about demand, it would also be different. And if you're talking about this sector where people rent, you see, the discussions are not exclusive. It cannot be said that just because somebody now can acquire a welfare house or a social house, that particular market for renting will not exist. No. I may own that house, but I don't want to live in it. It doesn't also mean that if I am in an urban setting like Nairobi, I will not get somebody who rents it.
Now that's where the discussion becomes juicier. Let's look at the actual data, demographics data. Okay, let's look at income distribution in Kenya. The people in formal employment are only 3 million. That's about the economic survey.
And out of a population of how many who are employable?
20, it's about 18 something million.
18 million are employable.
Who are actually in gainful economic activities. So only 3 million are in the formal sector. They're the ones who are being targeted for this levy. Okay? Now, what is the average salary for majority of Kenyans? The same demographic survey is telling us 74 to 75 from 2018 consistently earn less than 50,000. About 36% are earning less than 30,000. Now, take the taxman. If you earn 50,000, how much do you get as your net? It narrows down to around 39,000. Once you pay payee only. Okay? Now, NSIF has already taken another 1,000 from February. Now, we are told NHIF is taking another one. And now these levies are coming up. So what am I left with at the end of the month? Now, I live in Nairobi, and I travel and I commute. And that's why I say, let's not talk about things out there. Now, at 4 o'clock, prime time, prime rush hour, walk out to this bus station. You find folks waiting
for transport.
For transport. And actually they are waiting for fares to come down. Because they live on a very thin budget line. Go every bus station at rush hour. When the Matatus are charging 80, 100, you find folks waiting down for that fare to come down with 10 shillings.
So what you're saying is, it's not enough.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying. We are trying to solve a problem of income with something different. The problem we have here is a problem of income.
It's a problem of income.
It's a problem of income and unemployment. Because and that's why we are saying, we are assuming our economy is outside the other normal economies.
Income of the value of our currency and what it can do. Anyway, I think our time is almost coming up, isn't it?
It actually is. Yes. So I hear you also saying that we're trying to, fill a round, peg, a round hole with a square peg, and it may not work.
Yes.
Dr. Patrick Muinde, it's a conversation that needs to continue happening. We're told it's a fait accompli. It's going to pass, but will it work? And I think that's the question on top of Kenyans' minds today. Thank you for being in the hot seat this morning. Conversations continue. Asante sana.